I'm interested in risk because it's part of the decision-making process, that every time you make a decision, you essentially take some form of risk assessment. You may not take an intelligent one, or you may choose to ignore it. But one way or another, we're involved in risk. And my title is called From Here to Uncertainty. And I wanted you to think of a continuum. Well, at one end, we've got certainty. Now, we all like certainty. That's the crystal meth of decision-making. Everybody craves certainty. And down the other end, we really hate uncertainty. And you see that through things like sort of Maslow's hygiene factors and that terrible old cliche of financial markets, the market hates uncertainty. And then in the middle is this big lump called risk. And I have never met so many people now, probably not in an audience like this, but an enormous number of people who have risk or risk management on their business title. And I am not at all certain that's what they're doing. And I actually think in some cases, what they're doing might be making things worse. We shall see. So I wanted to try and find a picture that explained everything from certainty through risk to uncertainty. And I found this one. And I think you can sort of do a little bit of maths with that, whether you're the photographer looking at the cats or you're one of the cats and one are looking at one another. Those of you of a more philosophical bent will say, well, let's take it one step further. What if we had an infinite number of boxes with an infinite number of cats? And a lot of things to do with risk are slippery. There isn't a nice defined answer. And of course, we like certainty and we like a defined answer. And I think that's kind of part of the problem. So I'm going to sort of go back in time a little bit. I think we'll go back to 2006 and we'll end up in 1921. So maybe I'm not as topical as the rest of the speakers today. And I want to go back to the financial markets of 2006 and show you a picture of how people in the financial markets saw themselves and expected everybody else to see them and how they thought they were doing. And I found this rather nice picture of Cary Grant, probably taken in the late 1950s. He's a sort of premium end of the George Clooney market, if you don't kind of remember him. He's a better George Clooney, I think, but I might be showing my age. And here he is sort of strutting his stuff in, I guess that's late 1950s England, and smooth man about town, totally on top of things. And that was the situation in risk in the financial markets, really certainly from about 1990 to 2007. We're on top of all of this. We've got all the data. So when I hear now lots of talk about big data, I think, well, yeah, banks are crunching large amounts of data. Loads of models, loads of guys with PhDs in maths. What could possibly go wrong? Now, I think the picture is not Cary Grant. I think the market was a little bit more like this guy. And one of the problems is that there's a hell of a lot of looking backwards in very great detail. This is what I call sort of Hubble telescope driving. You've polished the mirror so perfectly, but you are still only looking backwards. What was the real problem with the banks was that he was not exactly driving in first gear. They were driving at faster and faster speeds, which was a function of that risk, because they thought they could price risk more effectively. Profit margins went down through competition, so they wrote more and more risk. And as a result, things went wrong. Pretty much all decisions involve data. And I know with an audience like this, you're sort of very educated in the pitfalls of data and the pitfalls of what can happen when you sort of torture the data to death. But I want to take you back to 1981, and looking at this audience, that's a long time ago for most of you. Some of the more elderly members of the audience may have been starting out on their career, or maybe in their small bedroom playing air guitar to Duran Duran or something like that. Maybe they were doing both. But this was what was going on in 1981 for people who can't remember or who weren't there. Prince Charles got married. Liverpool won the European Cup. Cricket fans will be very pleased, or only the English ones, sorry Adam. Very famous cricket Ashes series where Botham had some remarkable results, and the Pope died. Let's just spin forward a little bit to 2005, and I think you can kind of guess what's going to come next. Prince Charles got married. Liverpool won the European Cup. We won the Ashes. It's pretty rare, so I think it's quite nice to celebrate again. And John Paul II died. So does this mean that if Prince Charles gets married and Liverpool and England do well in sport, that the Pope must die? Probably not. But you start to wonder, don't you? Now, this is a really simple example of where we have a tendency to find patterns aren't there. And my good friend Paul Craven is here today, and he's got a great library of pictures which show where we look for patterns and we see shapes. You know, the classic one where we see the burnt piece of toast and there's a picture of Russell Brand, or any other Messiah, for that matter.